Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 3 of season 2 of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. Today's guest is John Healy. John is the founder and CEO of My Speaking Score, an AI speech assessment tool that evaluates spoken English and predicts TOEFL speaking scores. With over a decade of experience as a university professor in South Korea, John has logged thousands of hours of training both students and teachers in test prep strategies and academic subjects. His online study with it, TOEFL Clear Strategies and Tactics, TOEFL Turbo Tactics and others have helped learners from over 100 countries develop English skills and earn high TOEFL scores. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Hey everyone, buckle up for a new episode of the EFL Magazine Business Podcast, the one and only podcast made to help you launch your business or take your existing business to a level of success you could never have imagined. Whether you're a school owner, freelancer, publisher, or other entrepreneur, you're sure to pick up lots of actionable advice when you listen to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. Remember to visit eflmagazine.com for great articles and features. Without further ado, here's your host, the founder of EFL Magazine, Philip Pound.
Welcome back, everybody, to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast. And today's guest, it's my great pleasure, my thrill, and I'm overflowing with excitement to introduce you to the founder and CEO of My Speaking Score. Now we're going to go into what My Speaking Score is a little bit later. John Healy. John, nice of you to come on the podcast today.
Philip Pound, I'm delighted. I'm honored to be here. And thank you for having me. And thank you also for everything you do for the EFL, ESL world. It's just an absolute delight to be here.
Thank you very much, John. So we'll make a start. So we first came into contact, John. I think did I contact you through LinkedIn? Was that it? Or I sent, and you got back and say, I really want to get involved in the TOEFL Summit for teachers and managers. Or how did that come about? I can't remember. How did we first?
I think that's right. I think you were stalking me on LinkedIn.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
I got to tell you, I'm so glad you mentioned it, because it really is a powerful networking tool. And typically when you think about social media marketing or reaching your target audience, you think Facebook, you might think Instagram, but it was really valuable. And after, I connected with you, I noticed that my appearances in searches had spiked. So you may know that if you're a LinkedIn user, you get these little reports saying you appeared in so many searches this week, or this many people have viewed your profile. And as a result of our contact and my involvement in your incredible workshop a couple of weeks ago, I started getting so-called, I guess you'd say, noticed more, and allowed me to make other very, very interesting connections. So if you are a teacher or a LinkedIn user, I think that's a great piece of advice, Philip, is to get out there. Don't be shy. I think there are some good LinkedIn, what's the best way, like LinkedIn strategies, I guess, where, you may want to, as you did, introduce yourself and say hi, and here's why I think we would be, good connections. But anyways, it's a great world, and as a result, has kind of reinvigorated my interest in LinkedIn. So thanks for making that happen.
Yeah, no problem. So for anyone looking for tips on LinkedIn, I mean, I've used it in the past. I've spoken about when I first started EFL Magazine about 6-7 years ago. I just contacted people through LinkedIn, and I don't think there's any secret sauce. It's just you offer something, or you make, or I think you offer something. So I said, well, are you interested in this summit? I think this would be something you may like to attend. So that got your interest. I think I heard some advice elsewhere, and it said try to find something in common with somebody you want to. So for example, if they're from your hometown, went to the same university, that's also another tactic. So, John, anyway, so we got connected, and you did a wonderful seminar at the training conference, at the TOEFL training conference, and it was on your company, My Speaking Score. Tell me about My Speaking Score.
I would love to. So I'm a TOEFL instructor. Generally speaking, I've been in the TOEFL IBT world for years and years, all the way back in my days in South Korea and up to the present. And My Speaking Score is really a speech assessment engine that uses advanced speech assessment technology to estimate TOEFL speaking scores. So it's a great tool for teachers who want to estimate TOEFL speaking scores for their students. And it's a great self-help tool for students themselves who are preparing for the TOEFL and who need good feedback and good estimations on their speaking score. And in fact, it's a proxy. It acts as a proxy for ETS's proprietary speech rater technology. So that's what My Speaking Score is all about. And it's a platform that also connects students and teachers. We're really excited about it. It's been in the works for almost a year now. And we're getting some really good feedback from both the teaching and learning community out there. So thanks for the interest and the plug. If anyone is preparing for the TOEFL, especially that really difficult TOEFL speaking section, you know that you need good score estimates. Otherwise, you walk into the test, you pay your $300, and if you miss that target by 1 point, it's not only a disappointing waste of time, but also of money. So that's the problem we're trying to solve with My Speaking Score, Philip, in the market.
Okay, so I don't like using this word, but I'm going to use it. It gives you some granularity. Is that right? So that, I promise this time I'll use that word. But
somebody told me that, I mean, I like it. The fine-grained, analysis. There are a lot of probably, a bit silly ways to say it. Somebody the other day said, "I hate the word deep dive." I don't like when somebody says, "Today we're going to do a deep dive into TOEFL speaking," but you get the idea. You know that if you have any knowledge of TOEFL speaking, your speech is evaluated. Your responses in the TOEFL speaking section are evaluated by a piece of software called SpeechRater. It's a speech assessment engine. It's like AI. And you're also evaluated by one of ETS's TOEFL speaking raters, a real live human being. And the technology, the software, and the human rater typically listen for different things, qualitative things and quantitative things inside your speech. And before My Speaking Score, it was very difficult to get a look into the technology behind SpeechRater, the type of analytics that SpeechRater can surface to show the hidden features that are really being measured. And it's because we typically think of speaking as something that is assessed qualitatively, right? It's like we say things like, "That guy's English is really fluent," or "Wow, your pronunciation is really good." But those types of comments or observations are really rooted in opinion. And at the heart, the beating heart of a speaking assessment from a TOEFL IBT speaking point of view is really quantitative. And so there are calculations, micro calculations that are made that measure the distance between your words and the length of pauses and the number of filler words, and so on and so forth. The quality of your pronunciation is actually measured quantitatively. And so My Speaking Score presents that quantitative data to our users in such a way that you can make repairs to your speech to satisfy the requirements of TOEFL speaking. Now, to the extent that it helps you become a better English speaker, it's arguable, but to the extent that it prepares you for the TOEFL is absolutely unquestionable.
Okay, and this was something that was brought up at the summit as well. I can't remember if it was you, John, or maybe Rob Howard, who said that I think people were swapping stories of how many retakes students took. Did you say you had a student that was like dozens, maybe? Was that right? Or
yeah, well, I'm sure every TOEFL teacher has their own sort of war stories, right, about student experiences. And very often students naturally try to go it alone. And teachers, it can be expensive. It's a whole different set of commitments that you have to make when you work with a teacher. So it's natural that students want to try to take the TOEFL alone. And very often what happens is that an institutional requirement is you need a TOEFL score of 100. And the student will try to achieve that score by themselves and fail and retake and so on. And I think you're referring to the story of it's an amazing story, really. It's actually, the crazy part is it's a 3-part story, but I'll give you the very, very short, condensed kind of 3-act version of it. So about right at the time I was founding my speaking score, and I was building this tool to help this particular type of person who had tried and failed to achieve their target scores again and again. A guy came into my life, and I was a native Turkish speaker and had taken the test 7 times. And he wanted to be a pharmacist. And if you are a pharmacist educated abroad and want to become a pharmacist in America, you need to go through some recertification. And one of the recertification steps is achieving a high TOEFL speaking score of 26. It's very difficult to achieve. If you have a speaking score of 26, you're able to engage in very fluent responses and so on. So he couldn't get it. He was getting 25 and 25 and 25 and 25. And it's a perfect use case for my speaking score, because at some point you can say, okay, well, what's really the difference between 25 and 26? A human being, a teacher, may not be able to tell you. And he had been through a couple of teachers as well. So long story short, we showed him inside of my speaking score. And, it was just a couple of minor adjustments we needed to make. And it was a speaking rate, which was a bit too low. And his vocabulary depth score was a bit too low. And we made some adjustments to the way he organized and the way he delivered his responses. And he went in and he got his 26. And he was so over the moon about it. He referred another person, a colleague of his, who had taken the TOEFL 15 times. And at that point, you're thinking, this is close to a $5,000 investment. Imagine, again and again and again. And then you're at your 10th time and your 12th time and your 13th time. And anyways, she had this no quit attitude and the same story. In fact, as soon as she saw the data behind her score, there was like this major aha moment, and she realized very quickly, and with my help, we made some repairs. Again, it was a speaking rate issue. For all you people preparing for the TOEFL speaking, don't underestimate the power of speaking quickly. You should be targeting 170 words is what I always recommend. So we got her speaking rate up. There was a couple of other tweaks, some mispronunciations that are very clear in the data. And she felt so confident, Philip, after our work. This was a 10-day period, that she had a 16th test scheduled and she moved it up 2 weeks and went in, and her attitude was, I'm going to try it and see, but I'll save the other date as well. But she got 27. And the third and final crazy part of the story is that she recommended another person who had failed 10 times. So the whole idea of my speaking score and of TOEFL speaking coaching in general is that there are these really tough cases out there whose whole lives depend on this one score. I mean, can you imagine? You are a trained pharmacist, you're in America, you're paying rent, and you're operating as an intern pharmacist, waiting for your TOEFL speaking score, and you're 1 point away, and the difference in pay is like $60,000 a year. So that 1 point is worth that much. And it's about your status and about your peace of mind and about your profession and about your career objectives. So it was really life-changing. And I just love these transformational moments. So in your amazing workshop, I thought when I was hosting that panel, I thought it might be nice to try to trade some of these war stories that teachers inevitably have about teachers, success stories, mostly about these sort of journeys. And Rob said that he had met someone, I think he said, I have to go roll the tape, but you have to go back. But I think he said 30, which I had never. My big record was 15. But 30. Can you imagine 30 times waking up? Today is the 30th time I'm going to sit this test.
Yeah, it's already. But the product itself, I mean, it sells itself really. It obviously saves money because we've heard these war stories. It saves money. It saves time as well. Of course, these are the big selling points that people want. You know, in any proposal, don't they? It saves time, saves money. Of course, you don't have to sit this exam. And you know, it's not pleasurable sitting a TOEFL exam, is it? I mean, it's not a pleasurable experience at all. You know, ideally, it's something you want to pass first time, or maybe even do it on the second time. But also, you know, this product gives confidence, doesn't it? It gives confidence to the student that they don't have to do this, that they know exactly where they're at before they take the test. It gives confidence to teachers as well, because teachers can just say, well, I actually know what I'm doing. I know what's measured here but actually, you know, how it's marked, which we went into on the panel as well. And I think there's something slipped. Somebody said it was 50-50, wasn't a machine assessment and then, you know, human. And then I think there's maybe it's not 50-50. We don't know, but there's
we don't know. It's a closely guarded secret in the vault up in New Jersey. It's like you know, the secret sauce or the Kentucky Fried Chicken's secret ingredient. What's funny, you know, you mentioned that you don't want to take the TOEFL twice. I remember back in some of my earlier marketing ideas was that tagline, you know, nobody wants to take the TOEFL twice because it is stressful. And even since August of 2019, you know, the TOEFL has been shortened significantly, about 25% shorter, and they've reconfigured some of the sections to make them a little bit shorter. But as you mentioned, the holy grail of standardized testing, at the heart of that are really two concepts: reliability, the concept of test reliability, and test validity. And a test is valid if it's measuring what it's supposed to be measuring, and it's reliable if it does it over time. And when you're using a tool like my speaking score, what you're doing is removing the subjective analysis from the equation, and you're increasing the validity. And so this what I call the data first approach to TOEFL speaking means that it's the data itself that takes precedence, and your opinion, while still important, especially if you're a TOEFL teacher, kind of is deprioritized a little bit. And so the big time saver and the big confidence booster, as you mentioned, is saying, you know what, instead of relying on one teacher's opinion of my speaking performance, especially as you say, when you get into that granularity, the difference between 25 and a 26, are you prepared to make that call as a teacher on my 15th try, right? So it's best that we get valid and data results from the same assessment mechanism that is being used on test day. And to the point of whether or not it's 50-50, I don't think we will ever know, but I have some very good guesses, and I'm about to release a book, actually, and I want you to have the very first copy, Philip, but it's called TOEFL Speaking, a data-first approach to online teaching and teaching TOEFL speaking. That's the working title. Maybe a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is that we live in a time as TOEFL teachers where we can rely more than ever really on AI and data analytics to extract information from previously qualitatively assessed tasks like speaking. And so the whole idea about my speaking score is to bring and to encourage that form of data literacy into the TOEFL speaking world, especially for teachers who, as you say, may have varying degrees of expertise in TOEFL speaking, but many TOEFL teachers, TOEFL speaking teachers, TOEFL teachers in general, are really ESL, English as a second language, or EFL, English as a foreign language teachers, who also, quote, do test prep. So it's like, I remember years ago in one of my meetings, this is back in 2005 when I was in South Korea, and somebody was advertising for a TOEIC teacher. And so of course I applied, sure, I'm a TOEIC teacher, And so went to the interview with this Korean gentleman. He said, okay, John, nice to meet you. So what does TOEIC stand for? And I didn't know. It stands for Test of English for International Communication. We live in a world, Philip, crowded with acronyms. But my point is that I think you are alluding to this idea that sometimes if you're an English as a foreign language teacher, in other words, you teach English in another country like Korea or Saudi Arabia or somewhere, and you think, sure, I could teach the TOEFL. Isn't it just a test of English? And it is sort of, right? But my point is that it's really not. The TOEFL measures how well you take the TOEFL. It's best to think of TOEFL speaking in particular as a skill that's adjacent to, connected to, dependent on English, but it's a different thing. And it's sort of like, imagine you're watching guys like, I don't know if you play golf, but you can watch guys get out there and just hit drives, right? And they have the longest drive competition. And you're out there and you're watching these guys hit these tremendous drives, right? But that's all. They're not putting, they're not hitting out of the fairway. These are guys just hitting golf balls, and it's tremendous. And it has very little to do with the game of golf. I mean, you're hitting a golf ball with a golf club, or the guys in the basketball competitions, the slam dunk contest, and so on. The TOEFL is to English as the longest drive game is to golf, right? So it's a specialty subject, and it's not as easy to transition into as some English teachers would think. But my speaking score is also trying to make that path a little bit easier, because now if you're a trained English coach or English teacher, you can say, well, let's just outsource the assessment piece to my speaking score, and we'll work on some of the fundamentals that underpin the scores that you're seeing on my speaking score, namely fluency, pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, and coherence.
And if anyone wants to read articles on EFL Magazine, we have an archive of TOEFL articles, which I've put up on the homepage now to make it easier to access for everybody. And I think about 4 years ago, actually, Bruce Sterling, who you know is a very well-known writer and teacher of TOEFL,
Sure.
wrote an article for us. TOEFL is not an English test. So you might want to, the listeners might want to check that one out. Yeah, it's there on the site. I'll put it actually in the show notes as well. I'll put a link there. So John, let's talk about money. Okay, so how much does my speaking score cost? What's the damage?
What's the bottom line?
Yeah.
Let me see. What's the bottom line up front? Fantastic. Well, if you sign up for My Speaking Score account, you immediately get 2 full reports absolutely free. So that means that you're able to record a response to a TOEFL speaking prompt and then get that report, that fully detailed report, which includes a downloadable audio file, your waveform, the breakdown of 12 speaking dimensions under 5 feature classes. This is a world of jargon. It'll make perfect sense to you once you go and you create your free account. But we also, of course, have tiers to help teachers, and currently our premium tier costs $24 a month, and it enables you to get 6 full reports and connect with 2 students, to onboard 2 students into your dashboard, where you can share progress and communicate with each other. Teachers can even send students some credits so that they can self-assess. And then we have a pro tier, which gives teachers 30 reports a month and 20 student connections. And that's our most popular tier. And if you're a teacher out there with a student roster of 4 or 5 students, you're starting to think about coming to a tool, especially if you're a TOEFL specialist, coming into a tool like My Speaking Score that enables you to maintain inside your teacher dashboard on My Speaking Score a list of your students, and to monitor in real time their progress. But we also service the sort of the students at a retail level, right? And these are students who may not have a teacher, and they can come in and buy reports very easily as well, including a 4-pack of reports for $16. We have other tiers as well. And so the more reports and analyses that you buy, the cheaper the score, the cheaper the price is. But for anyone who is interested in developing a more data forward approach to TOEFL speaking analytics, and understanding as you say, that fine-grained assessment of their speech performance, you can go to myspeakingscore.com and to get signed up and take a look at it for absolutely $0 today.
Good, and we will have the link in the show notes as well. So, John, we will come back to My Speaking Score, but I wanted to get onto you, and we want to go down. Do you remember the Time Tunnel? Do you remember that TV show from the 60s? I think there was reruns in the 80s. There used to be a spiral tunnel. People would run down and they'd be able to travel in time. So let's go down the Time Tunnel to where it all started. How did you get into you're from Canada originally? How did you get you first went to South Korea? You've been around, so tell me a little bit about your journey.
I love telling the story, and I haven't told it for a while, so it could be a bit rusty, but in a nutshell, back in around the Y2K time. Maybe some of our listeners are even too young to remember what that was like, right? And the build up to Y2K. But at that time, I was in the software world, and we were developing software in Ottawa, Canada, for mostly the federal government. If you're in the software business in Ottawa, you are working for the government of Canada in some way. And I was providing contracting services in a company called Network, and back in the day. And in 2003, I sold my company, and I had some free time on my hands, and I did what every 33-year-old guy would do with a fresh deposit in his bank account. I went down to Mexico and I hung around, and I sort of lived this aimless existence for a few months. And, I was walking down Rideau Street, and if anyone knows Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, beautiful city, my hometown, Rideau Street is the big street that you can find the Parliament buildings on. And I used to live in a little area called Sandy Hill. And one day I was walking down the street. I was going to the grocery store, and there was a banner that I had seen before, but had never really paid attention to. And there's a big banner on the second floor of this building right around the corner from my house. And it said, "Teach and travel, teach and travel." And on a whim, it's a bit unlike me, on a whim, I decided to walk up, and it was in the winter time. And I walked up the stairs, and I couldn't believe it. Behind the desk of this teach and travel place, I didn't really know what it was a woman that I had gone to high school with. And I hadn't seen her in 15 years, at least. And she said, "Hi, John." Like it had been 15 minutes. It was really strange. And so I said, "Jenny, oh my God." And so I said, "What's this all about?" And she said, "Well, come on back and let me show you." And what it was a TESOL training facility. And it was a 2-week program where they teach you how to teach English to speakers of other languages, TESOL, TESOL. And she said, "Listen, I can get you a bit of a deal." And I had nothing but time on my hands. And so I signed up on the spot. And I started going, I think it was like the next day, I started going to these workshops, these like 6-hour-a-day workshops. And they give you a big binders of, to turn you into this teacher who is then going to go travel. And so at one point in the training, they kind of, they point you towards this bulletin board, and there are all kinds of these job openings. And back in 2003, it was like, still a lot of faxing and stuff going on, but the holy grail jobs were the highest paying jobs were considered to be in Japan and Korea. And I'd known a guy who did a year in Japan. And for some reason, I just thought, well, it's just kind of, I know a guy who's been there. If I'm going to do something, I want to break trail, and I want to go really as far out there, out of my comfort zone as I could. And so on a whim, I decided to go to South Korea, and it was like that. And so I got online and I found a couple of jobs, and I faxed over my resumes. And then I started receiving emails, and my phone started ringing off the hook at weird times of night. And it was all of these people in Korea, all from these so-called hagwons, these little language learning academies for kids that teach kids English, that were interested in my resume. I couldn't believe it. I was in the headhunting business. I understood the idea of crafting a resume and trying to get people jobs and present them in the best way possible. But I had no idea the demand for English teachers. And I think it still exists. I'm sure it does, in fact, in South Korea and elsewhere. So it was a matter of weeks, Philip. This was, it took me now, I said the winter, but it must have been the spring, because it was a period of time of training. And anyways, I was in South Korea in September of that year, of 2003, and working like literally the next day for this little language learning institute. And it was the greatest thing ever to me. I landed in this small town called Changwon. It's small by South Korean standards, by the way. It has since amalgamated with other surrounding towns, and I think there's like 1 million people there. But when I had arrived, there were 400,000 people there, and I walked in to this language learning institute. And it was an English language place, and yet nobody spoke English. And I didn't speak a word of Korean. I had made a decision so fast to go there, and it was incredible. And all these kids started running up to me, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but you kind of get a sense of what it must be like to be a celebrity for a moment. There was definitely the only Weigukin, the only foreigner certainly in that little neighborhood where they had installed me into a furnished apartment about the size of a small living room, right? A tiny little place. But I was exhilarated, and I immediately felt at home in the classroom and building rapport with these little kids. And so that's how it all started. And of course, I went for a year and ended up staying for 16.
Wow. That's that. Yeah, but I can kind of get where you're coming from with the celebrity bit. When I lived in China, one day I was in McDonald's having a coffee, and I just looked over my shoulder, and there's this kid, as happens sometimes in China, just staring at me in through the window. And okay, that's kind of a everyday thing, but so the kid was just staring at me. So I looked, and I saw this arm come around the corner. It's the kid's mother, and then the kid's mother came, and she started staring at me as well. So it was that's my experience. But yeah, that happened. So you stayed for 15 years, and did you go the usual route of what was it, Hagwon, and did you go to you got further qualifications, work in the university? Is that what happened, or tell me about it?
Yes, and that is the path. I got to tell you, and please let me give a little bit of advice to anyone thinking about doing this type of thing, moving to another country, especially South Korea, because I could probably save you years, of trial and error. But yeah, it was pretty common as a career path, and maybe still is, to begin in the Hagwon system. And in South Korea, there are thousands and thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands, surely, of these so-called Hagwons. And a Hagwon is simply a learning institute that's privately operated from the so-called mom and pop shops run by typically a husband and wife, to big franchise operations that teach you everything and anything, from very esoteric things like, for example, there's a whole bunch of Hagwons that specialize only in preparing people for careers as flight attendants. There are all kinds of musical Hagwons. My nephew attends one that's only for advanced tuba players, Anyway, but the biggest Hagwon presence is the language learning Hagwons. And of course, everyone in South Korea is involved in some way with the Hagwon. And for example, it would be strange if as a kid you didn't go to a Hagwon after school. These kids there endure these grueling academic schedules. So all to say that there's lots of work there, but probably the reason for so many vacancies at the Hagwon level is, as you're saying, the next step up is probably a bigger Hagwon. So that's what I did. I started off in this small town and I stayed there for 2 years. It was a husband and wife team. They had one location. They were so small, they used to rent me out to another location across town. And so I would do Tuesdays and Thursdays in one place and the other days at the other place. And it was wonderful. I just loved everything about it. But eventually, after thinking, okay, I'm going to turn 1 year into 2. And then at that 2-year mark, it's like, what do you do now? Do you keep going or do you go back to Canada and do something else? And so I wanted to stay, and I had that hunger and maybe even a bit of ambition to go into the adult market. I think at some point, maybe natural for you to feel as a 35-year-old guy that this, teaching 6-year-old kids, it's a bit, I don't know. It got to the point where I thought that maybe there's some more intellectual stimulation there in the adult space. So and also I wanted to move to Seoul. I deliberately had chosen a small city because I figured Seoul at the time had 14 million people, and it was known to be just a bit overwhelming. And I thought, well, if I go to somewhere about the same size population-wise as Ottawa, then I'll have less of a difficult time adjusting. That was my idea. I'm not sure if it worked. There was a little bit of culture shock for sure. But anyways, yes, I stayed for 2 years and then sort of escalated, as it were, into the adult market. I worked for Pagoda in Seoul, a very well-known big Hagwon there. They have a big building right in Yeungnam, and stayed there for a couple of years. And then I got into teacher training, and I started teaching TOEFL to teachers at high schools and universities, and teaching English teaching theory and methods to help teachers in South Korea, Korean English teachers, up their teaching game. And then the manager of my training, Hagwon, specialized in this, teacher training stuff. He said, "John, I'm surprised you're not in a university." And I didn't have at that time a master's degree. Now, to teach English in South Korea, you need to have a BA. You need to have an undergraduate degree, but I didn't have a master's degree. And I thought, really? And it was like one of those things like, yeah, that's the next rung on the ladder. And so I did my master's, and as soon as I started my master's, I was applying to universities, and they were all ignoring me because I didn't have my MA. But I got a call back, and I had written a really nice cover letter, in effect saying, I'm in the middle of my master's degree. It's not really true. I had one course under my belt or something, but in progress was the message. And I got the interview, and I had to do a little teaching demonstration. And I still remember the day after the meeting, after my interview, the guy at the university said, I got to tell you, John, I think that was one of the best demonstrations we have ever seen. And he gave me the job on the spot. And I credit all of those years in the trenches, right? That really helped me. I got the job, but I'll still remember it was at Yeungnam University in outside of Daegu in a little town called Gyeongsan. And I can still remember walking out of that demonstration and knowing that I had the job and just feeling 10 feet tall. And that was the moment where I said, you know what? This is it for me. I'm going to stay. And I did. And I stayed at Yeungnam for another 5 years. And then I got a job at probably the most prestigious university in South Korea, at Korea University. So that was my ascent. And I really think I kind of summited there with my final few years at Korea University. It was amazing.
So I just want to pick your brains on the future of university teaching, because there's there's a few challenges out there for universities, isn't there? For example, in South Korea, there's the population is going to drastically decline, worse than, let's say, Japan or China within 20 years. Actually, a dentist student of mine gave me that information. But there's also the challenge from online and AI, of course, and, there's cheaper entrants coming into the market. What's the market like for university teachers and for teachers in general in what they call eikaiwa here, which is maybe like hagwon in Korea? Where do you see the market going?
Wow. I remember having a conversation like this about 12 years ago in South Korea. And one of the things we used to do, this was back when I was in Pagoda, my first private sector gig teaching adults. And one of the things we used to do is try to get so-called conversation material together. And you'd find these little pieces of reading and anything that you think would drive a conversation with adults in these conversation classes. And a really popular one that was going around at the time was something like, the Philippines estimates that by the year 2013, which, back then was like the distant future, by the year 2013, 80% of English teachers will have been replaced by robots or something. And it was always one of those pieces of content that would surface a variety of opinions, and thus was probably a very good choice. And it always worked well in conversation classes. That's what I think of when you ask me that question, because on the one hand, it's easy to see and to say as a proponent of artificial intelligence, my speaking score of offloading a lot of the assessment work that traditionally were done by teachers, that the future is pretty gloomy for some type of teachers, right? And that this, some specific niche teachers might become obsolete. But I think the future has got to be looking very great for human beings who, as you said at the top of the podcast, are in a position to offer tremendous value and to do what teachers do best, which is to decompose complex issues into simple, accessible, interesting, engaging, exciting subjects, and to deliver that material in a way that really changes lives and adds values to people's lives. So generally speaking, I would say that if you are interested in pursuing a career as a teacher of any kind, or as an EFL or ESL teacher specifically, I don't see any real threats there in the environment. In fact, I see it getting more and more competitive. Specifically in terms of careers in South Korea, our greatest tool was Dave's ESL Cafe.
I was going to mention it actually a little bit earlier. When you said 2003, Dave's ESL Cafe came into my mind, and the yellow background with the hyperlinks, and, the blue text, and it's still going.
Dave Sperling. Yeah. It's still, the reason I mention it, because I had a thought. I wonder if this guy is still around, and it's still there. And so the first thing I did, it even looks the same. The first thing I did is clicked on South Korean jobs, and sure enough, boom, pages and pages of jobs. So do I see a problem on the demand side in South Korea? No, in fact, when I moved my operation online in 2018, I left behind a cohort of colleagues that thought it was a bit, still, even in 2018, it was a bit risky. When I did my master's degree online in 2013, it's going back even further, 2012, there was talk of online degrees not having the same level of credibility and so on and so forth. And of course, we know the state of affairs today. So no, technology, as long as you're a teacher that is able to keep pace with the technological developments and continue upgrading your professional development and standards to meet the needs, I don't see any downside or any decline on the demand side. I see it becoming even more competitive on the supply side. What do you see, Philip?
Well, actually, I was going to mention Guy Seehey, who we had on the podcast last week. And Guy actually was much along the same lines. And he said that there'll always be room for people for one-to-one lessons for that, that human element. The word he liked to use was comity. So that was actually a segue for the next question, because speaking about coaching, that's what you do at the moment as well, isn't it? You describe yourself as a coach. Am I right in saying that? What would your title be as a TOEFL teacher? TOEFL coach, is that correct?
I've always loved coach. But I think it might be a bit overused these days. Everybody's a coach.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everybody's a coach. The idea of titling yourself in that way was to come across as more collaborative, maybe less pedantic, right? As opposed to a teacher, like, do you have a blackboard behind you or something? But I think where you're going is, am I still an operational coach, and do I still have clients? And I do. I'm really hoping, speaking of obsolescence, to make myself obsolete in some way, and to drive much more activity onto my site, because I really believe, not to put myself out of a job here, but I really believe that a lot of what we do, especially in my niche in TOEFL speaking, can be offloaded to a piece of technology. But of course, that one-on-one interaction is something that I still love to do. I'm still as exhilarated when I meet somebody new or I can help someone solve a problem as I was back in the days in 2003 with the kids dancing around me and saying, hi, John, Mr. John, Teacher John. And so I really, really love it. And I think if you have a taste for helping people and solving problems, and you're a people person, then teaching will always be a rewarding career. There's nothing, in my opinion, sadder than to see a teacher who thinks of teaching as a job. And so hopefully that title coach indicates something behind that, maybe a bit philosophical, that I really do see myself as an enabler of people's ambitions, as opposed to kind of a finger wagging type of guy, with a grammar book in one hand.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about your entrepreneurial journey. And so you're at this position now. You're CEO, founder of My Speaking Score. You do coaching for TOEFL also. And we heard about you selling your company, your software company, back in 2003. So then, you've been teaching in universities for a while. Had you some other gigs? Had you kind of kept this alive, or did you have a kind of a hiatus, say, okay, I'll do this for a while and then I'll go back to the entrepreneurship? How did that work?
Right. Well, if you are teaching, living and working in South Korea, inevitably you're gig aware. Can I put it that way? You're gig aware. At the summit, so-called, of my career in South Korea, when you're working in a university, you're teaching in the classroom maybe 11 hours a week, 14 hours a week, something like that. You have 5-6 months of absolutely no classes at all, right? So you can figure out that you're working, a couple of hundred hours a year. So it opens up all kinds of possibilities not only for you to think about alternative interests and develop other activities, but to maybe take on a little side gig. So my first foray into that world was into the courseware development world, and I can remember back in 2016. I came across I started my first blog. I was very proud of it, and had absolutely like 3 readers a month or something. But I had my little self-hosted WordPress site, and I would write about all things EFL. And it was called Grab 6. And the idea was that
grab the number 6 or SIX?
Grab the number 6, grab SIX, grab it. And the whole idea was that everything that, should be presented as a learnable packet should be consumable in 6 minutes, probably 6 seconds these days. But anyways, that was my first sort of glimpses. Wow, I can leverage online and websites to get across some of the things that I've been teaching in classes. And then I found an LMS, and I remember saying to my dad at the time, I want to be the LMS guy. I want to learn everything I can about learning management systems. I wanted to start developing courses, and I was doing a lot of TOEFL at the time. And so I recorded which is, I don't think you can find it online anymore. Although you might be able to see some of it on Skillshare, but I've since removed a lot of the stuff from Udemy. It's been a bit dated, but I developed a fairly comprehensive course called TOEFL Clear Strategies and Tactics, and I started selling that. And back in the day, now this is 2018 now, coming into 2019, I had 2,500 or 2,600 students enrolled, and was helping all kinds of people through my program. And then I developed another one called TOEFL Turbo Tactics. And so at that time, it was that perfect opportunity for me to say, okay, yes, you can simultaneously maintain a career in academia and nurture that ambition that I had to get out there in the private sector and to see if you could create something that has value and actually sell it. I remember selling my first course online and getting that first ding in PayPal and thinking, it was $99. And I thought, this is absolutely incredible that I can dream up something, film it, badly in a badly lit room in my house, put it online, and somebody's going to give me a credit card. And it was exhilarating. And so that was really the catalyst. And I started thinking and talking with my wife about eventually transitioning out of academia and more into online. And then one thing led to another. So thence from the blog to the courses to my speaking score in a relatively short amount of time. We're talking about 4 years. One of the things that exist out there for self-styled online teachers, people who are looking to transition into the online teaching world, either as a gig or full-time, that didn't exist when I did it, is that there's so many good people out there. I'm thinking of Amy Porterfield and Ryan Levesque and Aaron Fletcher and so many others in the Ezra Firestone I'm a big fan of. So many people out there that could show you how to do it, how to operationalize an online course, how to get a handle on all the moving parts. Because if you are looking to express yourself creatively or to try to plant a flag out there and to say, I want either a piece of this marketplace, or I have something to share, I have a story to share, I have a course in me. People used to say, I have a book in me. Now they say, I have a course in me, right? but it is can be daunting to figure out on your own. And so on the trend side of the equation is, you have to figure out, is there a market for my message? And is there an audience out there that's actually potentially going to buy something from me? But then there's the walking your own path part of it, which is I see this gap in the marketplace, and I know that my own style, my own message, and my own story, and my own teaching techniques can fill that void profitably. And I wish I had access to some of these amazing leaders who show you how to set up everything you need to operationalize a course. And with platforms, not only like My Speaking Score that help you with the assessment side, but other platforms that enable you to publish a course very, very quickly. There are a lot of options out there, and I'm not surprised to see so many people moving to the online world. You see more of a movement from offline to online in the teaching world?
Well, I think through COVID, it's natural, isn't it? But even post-COVID, I think it will change, and especially here in Japan, there's been they've been slow to adapt or adopt. Let's adapt or adopt to online teaching traditionally. I mean, even I don't know what it was like in Korea, but people took the Shinkansen, the bullet train to Osaka to have a meeting rather than have what we used to call teleconferences. We don't. That term is probably redundant now. We don't. We have Zoom, so maybe teleconference is a word of the past. But I think naturally that's the way. I think the general trend with businesses is that people don't want to return to workplaces, do they? They want to work from home. They know that commuting wasn't necessary. They could do most of the work. They could be productive. But of course, that's different for different companies. Some have actually bricks and mortar assets that they need to fill, and with others, with other tenants. But I think even here in Japan, Fujitsu, for example, is they're going to change to working from home within. They're phasing out all the leases. I
Philip,
think
you have to do it. But they have to do it. My brother is an executive at Microsoft. They're doing it. They're realizing, as you're saying, that the days of saying to people, we expect you in the office, and the old idea of the supervisor kind of looking sideways at you as you're rolling into the office at 9:02. Those are really old ideas, and they're premised on the assumption that unless you're being actively supervised, you're probably not, doing your job. And I think for a large segment, as you say, not all of it, but a large segment of the economy, those ideas are not only wrong, they're being proven wrong faster and faster, thanks to, in part, the acceleration that occurred after COVID, and the response that companies have had to adapt to the growing demands of their employees to be autonomous. And it's not so dissimilar from the teaching world. It would be unheard of even a few years ago in South Korea to put your kid online, and it never made sense to me, practically speaking. Like in South Korea, like, why not have your kid in the house, right? Why put your kid on a school bus in a traffic jam to send him 45 minutes away to a hagwon where he goes up, and so there's so many tremendous benefits. And I'm chuckling because I just put my 3.5-year-old daughter online. And you think maybe kids that young don't have the attention span or the desire or whatever, but Kayla's been amazing, and she's learning Italian online and French online. She's taking ballet classes online, And so with those twin forces of the private sector and technology companies all operationalizing work from home initiatives and online teachers, being able to provide tremendous value real time, as you say, in Zoom or through the creation of courses, there's a clear pattern here that has to be really exciting for anyone with a laptop, an idea, and high-speed internet connection, right?
So if you were starting again with a business in ELT, EFL, what would you do? So for people out there, where is the money to be made?
Yeah.
In this.
Okay, well, let me tell you where the money is not. And that little anecdote about the ballet class is not it. And people say $100 an hour. That's the dream for me. And that's wonderful. Okay. But when we're talking about real money, you have to adapt a different mindset, and you have to stop trading your time for money. You can no longer do it. It's not scalable, right? You could get all excited and think, well, if I could make $100 an hour, I could teach 12, 14 hours a day, that'd be great. And then I'd be making, $30,000, $40,000 a month. That's over $250,000 a year. That's $300,000-$400,000 a year. This is incredible, right? And of course, it's a perfect example of pushing, a practical idea to absurd limits. The answer is, if I had to go back, I would become much more fluent earlier in communication, online marketing, including copy and audience building. In fact, you know what? And I consider myself to be pretty good at it now. I just had my eyes opened by someone who was on the workshop, and it's her name is Karen DeVecchio. I hope I have that right.
So like the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, the same spelling.
I love it. The Ponte Vecchio. Oh my God, I was just there the other day.
I'm hearing the song in my head. The Ponte Vecchio is for Puccini, isn't it? Yes.
That's right. It's I'm sorry. Let me just take two on that. It's
sorry.
Karen
Levesque.
Karen is Levecchia. It's her name.
Levecchia.
But my point is, try to track her down on Clubhouse, because she's amazing.
Oh, well, of course, Karen. No. I know Karen, of course. She attended the TOEFL Summit.
She sure did.
Yes.
The reason I mentioned Karen is not only is she emerging as one of the world-class TOEFL and IELTS experts, but she really opened my eyes to a whole new way of building an audience. And that is, you go out there, you figure out a way to establish and amplify your authority in one specific niche, and you do it regularly like a beating drum, and you get out there and you build your audience, and you acquire those testimonials, and you become known in that one little niche that you occupy as the absolute best at it. And so in the Clubhouse world, it's all blue ocean out there, right? I mean, people are still figuring out how to fill rooms and so on. And so she's in there, and it was just a reminder, not only that you have to be so persistent to build and nurture your audience, but that's really everything. It's that drives everything. So if I had to do it all again, it would be audience first, courses second, right? You don't build the course and then say, now I need an audience. You build an audience and say, hey guys, what do you want to learn? Let me go build it for you. And then you bring it to them. And so that's the big process shift. And if I could time travel back through your little time tunnel and whisper something in my ear as a younger man, I would say, build your audience, nurture your audience, develop tremendous value, care about your audience, interact with your audience all the time, and then listen to your audience. They will tell you what they need, then go build that.
So, John, we've had a deep dive today into the blue ocean, and we got some granularity going forward. So tell me what's next for My Speaking Score and for you. Have you any other projects in mind? You don't have to tell us in detail, but are you...
Well, I'm so excited you offered. Okay, so first of all, myspeakingscore.com is ready, operationalized, ready to go right now. But we have a very exciting feature pipeline, and we're constantly building new features. We're listening to our customers, right? And we're including features that they're asking for. The latest one to go on My Speaking Score is file upload. So that if you're a TOEFL speaking teacher or you're a student and you have a recording of yourself that you want analyzed, you can quickly upload that and get the exact same metrics back that you could if you were giving a live response. And I can't tell you too much because I'm under NDAs, and but we're in talks right now with a very large company to plug in an AI training component to My Speaking Score. And down the road, I just bought mywritingscore.com, and I want to do the same thing for writing, TOEFL writing at first, and then maybe beyond. When we built My Speaking Score, we didn't call it My TOEFL Score. We called it My Speaking Score because we're hoping to serve also IELTS customers and maybe even TOEFL Essentials or Duolingo or other standardized English speaking tests. So in a nutshell, more online, less coaching one-on-one, although I still love it, and more audience building. And growing our list as well. It's an exciting time, isn't it, to be in the online world?
It is an exciting time. And John, if there's if people want to work with you, they want to work for you, or how can they get in contact? What's the best way? Through LinkedIn?
You can discover me on LinkedIn. I have lots and lots and lots of connections, and that's LinkedIn. John Healy, Healy. Drop me an email. Can I mention my email?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Put it in the show notes. Score at myspeakingscore.com. We have a very, very small team. We're 6 people. So I see every single email that comes in. And speaking of interacting with your audience and so on, we monitor that account very carefully and very closely, answer every single email question, every single one, nothing gets ignored. So I would love if there's anyone out there who wants to learn how to become a TOEFL speaking teacher or a TOEFL teacher in general, who's looking for resources, who's looking for a way to get started, who's looking for an account, contact me, find me on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect with you on that platform or to help you get started on My Speaking Score.
And thank you. I've thought of a guest. I have a few really great guests coming up over the next few weeks. I'm going to get in contact with Dave Sperling and see if we can get Dave on. And we will find out all about Dave's ESL. So I hope he's...
Wouldn't that be great? I think he was rumored to be living in Thailand all of those years. And speaking of real pioneers online, he was the guy, right? He had found a gap in the market that served a niche that was just small enough to not excite any of the big online companies like Yahoo at the time. I'm like, why doesn't Yahoo do this? Or something, right? And then, but it was big enough so that he could enjoy, if you do the quick math on like the listings and his cost per listing and so on, you realize that he's probably got a very nice, very, very nice business going there as well. So he was always a model of of how to do it online. And he was one of the first e-commerce guys out there in the teaching space to do it. And the crazy thing is, his website hasn't changed much in 20 years. It's the old great example of, if it ain't broke.
And John, thanks again.
Philip, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the EFL Magazine Business Podcast with Philip Pound. For more great advice and resources, check out eflmagazine.com. If you found this podcast helpful, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. See you next time.